few times a year, a small group of oil ministers flies into Vienna, sits down in one building, and decides how much crude oil the planet will get. They don't own the world's oil companies. They don't set the price of petrol at your local pump directly. But when they raise or lower a single number by a few 100,000 barrels a day, markets move, currencies wobble, and the cost of nearly everything that has to be shipped, flown, or driven shifts with it. This is the most powerful cartel on Earth, a cartel that, unlike almost every other, is completely legal because its members aren't companies, they're countries. This is how OPEC actually works. Rewind to 1960. Back then, the price of oil wasn't really set by the countries the oil came from. It was set by a handful of giant Western oil companies, nicknamed the Seven Sisters, who controlled almost everything from the well to the petrol station. When those companies cut the price they paid, the producing nations simply lost income, and there was nothing they could do about it. So in September 1960, 5 of them, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela, met in Baghdad and founded the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. The idea was simple and radical. Stop competing against each other and start negotiating as a bloc. Coordinate policy, stabilize the price, and claw back control of the single most valuable resource on the planet from the companies that had been pumping it. Over the next decade, more producers joined, and the balance of power in the oil world began to tilt. So, who's actually in it? Today, OPEC is a club of 11 countries. 4 are in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and Kuwait. 6 are in Africa, Algeria, Libya, Nigeria, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, and the Republic of the Congo. And 1, Venezuela, sits in South America, holding some of the largest oil reserves on Earth. They are wildly different, some enormous, some tiny, some rich, some in crisis. But together, they sit on roughly 80% of the world's proven oil reserves. 4 out of every 5 barrels still in the ground that we know about. That is the source of the whole organization's power. It is not that OPEC pumps most of the world's oil today. It actually produces only about a third. It's that it's sitting on most of the oil that's left. And towering over all of them is one member, Saudi Arabia, the largest producer, the biggest exporter, and as we'll see, the country that really runs the show. Here's the thing that surprises people. OPEC produces nothing. It owns no wells, drills no holes, sells no oil. It is structurally a meeting. At the top sits the OPEC Conference, the supreme authority, made up of each country's oil minister. They gather at the headquarters in Vienna, Austria, and here's the crucial rule. 1 country, 1 vote, and decisions are meant to be unanimous. Tiny Gabon, in principle, has the same vote as Saudi Arabia. Below the conference is a board of governors and a permanent staff called the Secretariat, the analysts and economists who crunch the numbers year-round, led by a Secretary General. But the Secretariat can't order anyone to do anything. All the real power lives in that room full of ministers, trying to agree, which brings us to the one lever they actually pull. OPEC has essentially one tool: how much oil its members pump. The logic is basic economics. Oil is a commodity. If the world is drowning in it, the price falls. If it's scarce, the price climbs. So the ministers agree on a collective ceiling, a total amount the group will produce, and then carve that ceiling up into a quota for each member. You may pump this much and no more. Want prices higher? Announce a cut. Take barrels off the market. Want prices lower? Maybe to punish a rival or grab back customers. Open the taps. That single dial, supply, is how a group of 11 governments reaches across the planet and nudges the price of a barrel in Houston or Rotterdam. It sounds powerful. It is powerful. But it has a fatal weakness built right into it. The weakness is this: every member has a private incentive to cheat. Picture the deal. Everyone agrees to hold back oil so the price stays high. But if the price is high and you quietly pump a little extra above your quota, you sell those extra barrels at that lovely high price and pocket the difference. The problem is that everyone is tempted by exactly the same logic at exactly the same time. Economists call this a prisoner's dilemma, and OPEC lives inside it permanently. And they do cheat constantly. One political scientist studied the record and found members broke their production promises about 96% of the time. There is no OPEC police force, no army to enforce a quota, no court that can fine a country for overproducing. So why hasn't the whole thing collapsed? Because of one member willing to do something the others won't. That member is Saudi Arabia. The Saudis hold something almost no one else does: spare capacity, the ability to turn production up or down by millions of barrels a day, quickly, on purpose. Most countries pump flat out all the time. Saudi Arabia deliberately keeps a cushion in reserve, which makes it the world's shock absorber. When cheaters flood the market and threaten to crash the price, Saudi Arabia can cut its own production to soak up the excess and hold the price up, playing what's called the swing producer. And when it wants to discipline everyone, it can do the opposite: open its own taps, crash the price, and let the high-cost producers bleed until they fall back in line. That combination, the biggest reserves, the biggest exports, and the only real spare capacity, is why Saudi Arabia is OPEC's de facto leader. But even Saudi Arabia eventually hit a limit. And the answer to that limit was to make OPEC bigger. By the mid-2010s, OPEC had a problem it couldn't cut its way out of. A boom in American shale oil was flooding the market with millions of new barrels from outside the cartel entirely. Every time OPEC cut production to lift prices, it just handed market share to producers it didn't control. And the biggest of those was Russia. So in late 2016, OPEC did something it had resisted for decades. It picked up the phone to its rivals. The result was OPEC Plus, the original members, plus around 10 non-OPEC producers led by Russia, all agreeing to coordinate their output together. Suddenly, the group at the table controlled not a third of the world's oil, but roughly half of it. OPEC Plus isn't a formal treaty organization like OPEC. It's a standing arrangement run in practice by two capitals, Riyadh and Moscow. And the core of it is a small group of 8 countries doing the heavy lifting of the cuts, a couple of million barrels a day held back from the world, adjusted meeting by meeting, as they try to read where prices are going. To see what this power looks like when it's fully used, go back to October 1973. Arab members of OPEC, furious at Western support for Israel in that year's war, announced sharp production cuts and an embargo. In a matter of months, the price of oil quadrupled, from around $3 a barrel to $12. In Britain, factories dropped to a 3-day week. Across Europe, countries banned Sunday driving. In America, drivers queued around the block and were rationed by their license plates. That was the moment the world understood that this small group of countries could reach into every economy on Earth. It happened again and again. The spikes of 1979, the great price collapse of 1986, the surge to nearly $150 in 2008, and a brutal price war in 2020 when Saudi Arabia and Russia briefly turned their taps on each other, and oil, for one strange moment, traded below zero. But the cartel today is not what it was. American shale turned the United States, a country that isn't even in OPEC, into the single largest oil producer on the planet, and OPEC's share of world production slid from around half at its peak to roughly a third. Every cut it makes to defend the price quietly hands more of the market to someone else. Inside the group, the old discipline is fraying. In 2023, Angola walked out over its quota, and in 2026, the United Arab Emirates, one of its most important members, announced it was leaving both OPEC and OPEC Plus altogether, wanting the freedom to pump its own oil on its own terms. And hanging over everything is the longer question: a world slowly trying to burn less oil, and a cartel whose entire power rests on the world needing more. OPEC's dilemma has never been sharper: cut production and lose the market, flood it and crash the price. For 60 years, a small group of countries in a room in Vienna has held that balance, deciding, a few 100,000 barrels at a time, what the world pays to move. The oil is still in the ground. The question is, how much longer the room still matters.